Hey, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory that's due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who all in this truth from to rule well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. Unto you I say shalom. Coming to you back with another lesson through the Spirit. And I'm going to entitle this one, America is on borrowed time. Because the kingdom that we're currently in, which is a revived Roman Empire, going into the four beasts in the book of Daniel, where that four beasts would have that wound, but it will be healed. Going into the Renaissance period after the self-proclaimed white man, which is Esau, Edom, was loosened from that prison, from those caves, from the bottomless pit, which is ultimately Europe, written in the book of Revelation chapter 20, how Satan would be loosed for a little season. And we're in that little season of Satan, which we know it's not a spiritual demon Satan, but the physical counterpart, which is the self-proclaimed white man Esau, Edom. That's who's currently ruling America, Babylon the Great, along with this whole beast system, NATO and the EU. But Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai has ultimately set up that time frame, that time period where he would be allowed to rule. And him ruling the planet Earth, him ruling America, Babylon the Great, him having complete control of the resources, what people learn in schools, control of the food supply, what people put in their plates, in their mouths. So really, this devil was given a complete earth, like it says in the book of Job, chapter 9 and verse 24. The earth is given into the hands of the wicked, but the earth wouldn't be given unto the wicked for eternity. It would only be given unto the wicked, the sons of the wicked, which are the Edomites, the self-proclaimed white people, for a period of time. And that period of time is almost up. It really is, it's already up, because it's already at its 250 a year, which is the average age of an empire. Just like Rome. What was Rome doing? Rome was doing the same, America, Babylon the Great, along with this whole Edomite system, is doing the same thing that Rome was doing. And we're about to get into that. Right here it says similarities between the fall of ancient Rome and America, and how America can fall just like Rome. In the Chat GPT, it says the comparison can be useful, but it should not be treated as a prophecy or a one-to-one match. Fall of the Western Roman Empire was a long unraveling, not a single day, when everything suddenly stopped. But America, Babylon the Great, it's already been on a decline, especially after they took the dollar off of the gold standard. Now that dollar, the U.S. dollar, pretty much is a fiat currency, is worthless, is being dropped by all these different partners that the U.S. had. Saudi Arabia, all these Arabian countries doing away with the petrodollar. So really, America has already been falling for a long time. Now it's just being made evident. It says the United States is wealthier, more technologically capable, geographically protected, and institutionally different from Rome. Still, large powers can weaken when internal problems compound faster then they could be repaired. And like the scripture says, a kingdom divided amongst itself, it cannot stand. If Satan be divided amongst himself, his kingdom cannot stand, but it is going to have an end. And that's what's happening. Esau, even the self-proclaimed white man, which is the physical counterpart of the spiritual demon Satan, they divided. Russia, Ukraine, France, Spain, all these Edomite countries are divided amongst themselves because they're trying to have that top position in the New World Order. It says, first point 1, political division, and loss of trust. Rome suffered repeated civil wars, civil claimants to power, assassinations, and a public increasingly doubtful that the government served the common good. And what are people starting to find out? That the government was really never formed. That this last hope in Donald Trump, 47, Nero 47, which we believe through faith that Trump is Nero in the reincarnation. What is all these people that voted for Trump, the MAGAs, what are they doing now? Now they're backpedaling, because Trump is doing the complete opposite that he said he was going to do, that he was going to make America great again. He's just making it worse. He started another war with Iran. He's helping out the small hats, the tiny caps. So these people that once believed that somehow this was their last chance of making America great again, it was all a lie. And this is why people are bugging out. They're losing their minds. It says, in America, the equivalent risk is not emperors fighting for the throne. It is hardened polarization, disputed legitimacy, institutional distrust in a political system that cannot consistently solve long-term problems. When citizens view every election, court, agency, or media outlet as illegitimate, governing becomes harder. Yeah, what did Trump say a couple days ago? We need to find those communists because they're a threat to society. Pretty much saying if you're not with this new world order, if you're not with the Trump administration with their agenda, which is ultimately to fulfill the elite banking families, their end goal, which is a new world order. It says, point 2, debt, currency pressure, and a government that spends beyond its capacity. How much is the U.S. currently in debt right now? $39 trillion on its way to 40. It says Rome faced mounting military and administrative costs, higher taxation, and currency debasement. The modern parallel is not Roman coin clipping, but persistent deficits, rising debt, service costs, inflation risk, and pressure to finance promises without matching revenue. The Congressional Budget Office projects a $1.9 trillion federal deficit in the fiscal year 2026, and debt held by the public rising from 101 of GDP to 120 by 2036 under current law. That does not mean collapse is inevitable, but it reduces room to respond to recessions, wars, disasters, or financial shocks. And this is how Esau, the self-proclaimed white man, has gotten all these resources by going around the countries, promising that it's going to help out that country, that it's at need, that it needs to be protected from all these different rebels, trying to attack and take their resources. This is Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 5. Yet also because he transgresseth by wine, his philosophy is democracy. It says, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, but who enlarges his desire as hell, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. And this is what he's doing. He could never be satisfied. The self-proclaimed white man, Esau, Edom, can never be satisfied. That's why he's constantly building, chopping trees down, polluting the waters, taking all these different countries' natural resources. Now he wants to take Iran's oil to try to take over the Strait of Hormuz. But it says right here, verse 6, shall not all these take up a parable against him, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his? How long into him that ladeth himself with thick clay, that thick clay going into that depth? How did Esau, Edom get all this, so-called wealth? Through debt. That's why it's a credit-based society. Everything is based off of credit. You want to buy a house, boom, you get a $300,000 loan out of thin air. That amount of money's not backed up in a bank by gold or silver or actual physical assets. The stock market portfolios that these people have, it's all a number on a screen. So once reality hits for all these people in the world, for these Americans, these Babylonians, that put their trust in the system, they're about to be in for a rude awakening. It says, point 3, an overstretched global role. Rome had vast frontiers to defend and expensive military commitments across multiple regions. America does not have the same kind of land frontier, but it does maintain worldwide alliances, overseas bases, trade routes, and security commitments. If military spending, debt costs, and foreign crises rise together, leaders face difficult trade-offs between domestic investment and global power. And what has all these different countries that were once in league, that had alliances with the United States, for example, Saudi Arabia and these different Arabian countries, they're cutting their ties with America, Babylon the Great, because now being in league with Babylon the Great, now that puts a target on your back from all these different nations that are against the U.S. For example, when the Strait of Hormuz, when that war started, what was Iran doing? They were shooting missiles, at all these different countries that had military bases. So once, these countries that were once in alliance with the U.S., now they're saying to hell with it. Hell no, you getting us get hit with all these missiles and bombs because we're in league with you. So these different nations are cutting ties with America, Babylon the Great. That's why you have the BRICS that was formed. Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa. Because these countries, they're stepping away from the U.S. dollar, which that's ultimately how the U.S. has had his grip on the world, through his petrodollar that is ultimately backed up by the military. It says, point 4, economic inequality in a weakened shared state. Late Rome had major divides between elites and ordinary people, with tax burdens and insecurity falling unevenly. And what's happening right now, that squeeze is being put up on these people by the way of AI, automation, mass layoffs. You got talking about there's a housing crisis because there's not enough land to build homes. When here you got all this open land, but here the devil, Esau, Edom, says, oh man, we don't have enough jobs. We don't have enough land. We need to put everybody in 15-minute cities and put a RFID micro chip inside everybody and give them universal basic income. This is what these elites are doing. They're putting that squeeze upon the people to eliminate the middle class, which is that's pretty much just through. So now there's either you're poor or you're rich. It says America's version is not identical, but high housing, healthcare, education, and living costs can leave people feeling that the economy works mainly for asset owners and politically connected groups. A society becomes less stable when people no longer believe work, law, and civic participation increases or can improve their lives. And get this quick precept pretty much going into that point. People don't have that same optimism that they used to have for America, Babylon the Great, the American dream. You work hard and you go to college, you get a good paying job as soon as you graduate. Now you got people graduating with degrees in the STEM field, that are constantly in need of those positions, but they're not hiring either. These people graduating with these 4-8-year degrees talking about, man, I can't find a job, or if I do get an offer, it's for, a salary that is pretty much not paying for me having this degree. So it's like, man, what the hell? So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 3. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. And that's what's happening, the grinding. How people love to say, Jake oh, I'm on my grind. I'm finna get on that grind. I'm about to get the bag. That grind is season. You know, you got all these mass layoffs. You got jobs cutting hours. You know, they're cutting staffing. So now you got to do more people's work. You got to do the job of 3-4 people when you only used to do, you know, your task. But now you got to do all these different tasks for the same amount of pay. You know, the same salary. So these people are like, man, what the hell here? You know, we're working all these hours, putting all this extra work. But people aren't getting a raise. People aren't getting a salary increase. People aren't getting promotions. You know, people are staying at their jobs because there's not any opportunities like that. So what is that doing? That's leading to people being laid off, which is leading to homelessness. People being in that state of despair. They don't have that same optimism that they used to pre-2020. It says, point 5, dependence on systems that can be disrupted. Rome depended on grain supply routes, tax collection, roads, and armies that had to function across huge distances. America depends on electricity, fuel, ports, trucking, digital networks, semiconductor supply chains, finance, and food logistics. A major cyber attack, pandemic, financial crisis, or energy shock could expose weak points quickly. Modern collapse will likely look less like barbarians enter a city and more like cascading failures, shortages, unemployment, credit, stress, outages, unrest, and local governments struggling to provide services. And this is literally already happening. It said local governments struggling to provide services. You just had the government shut down a couple months ago. They weren't able to provide those basic services, getting your driver's license, you know, being at the airport line, you know, waiting for TSA to check you out. And this is affecting every single sector, you know, in this whole government. You know, you got parks and public services that aren't being funded, you know, because you had Elon Musk create that Doge, the Department of Government Efficiency, cutting out all these different sectors and cutting food stamps. So it says a major war, cyber attack, pandemic, financial crisis, or energy shock could expose weak points quickly. And that's what's about to happen with this whole Strait of Hormuz situation being closed. What's about to happen once those oil reserves run out? You know, it's going to be all hell getting ready to break loose. And I'm going to get this quick scripture. This is 2nd Esdras chapter 16 and verse 21 in the GNT, the Good News Translation. It says, the time is coming when food will be so cheap that people will think a time of peace and plenty has arrived. But then disasters will spring up everywhere. Wars, famine, and great confusion. So this is why these people in America, Babylon the Great, are still in that mindset that nothing's going to happen, because the wars, famine, and great confusion, that's going on at the other side of the world, the eastern side, over there in Iran, Israel, Lebanon, Russia, Ukraine. So these Americans, they're in that mindset, oh man, that's going on over there. Over here, we still have food. We got McDonald's. We got Whataburger, Starbucks. So we good. We got AC. You know, you got people dying of heat waves because they don't have AC. But these Americans, these Babylonians, they're so comfortable and used to these dainties that Esau, Edom has gave them, that they're in that mindset that, oh man, nothing's ever going to happen. But it says, verse 22, many people on earth will starve to death, and those who escape starvation will be killed in war. Verse 23, their corpses will be thrown out like garbage, and there will be no one left to comfort the living. The earth will be deserted and its cities demolished. And this is what's going to happen when that society collapse finally happens, which is right around the corner. This is point 6. It says external pressure and exploiting internal weaknesses. Rome was not simply defeated by barbarians. Outside groups became more dangerous because Rome was divided, financially strained, and politically unstable. Likewise, America's main vulnerability is not necessarily an invasion. Rival states, disinformation campaigns, cyber attacks, economic coercion, and supply chain disruptions become more effective when a country is already divided and distrustful. And that's what 2020 did. 2020 just created more division amongst these Americans, these Babylonians. So these Americans, these Babylonians, they're already at a tipping point. They're ready to crash out. And that's exactly what they're about to do when all hell breaks loose, when the economy collapses. These people are truly going to show their colors when they haven't ate in days, when their stomach is touching their back. Their ribs are showing. It says, point 7, decline in civic responsibility and competence. Rome's decline involved failures of leadership, corruption, short-term power struggles, and difficulty maintaining a capable administration. The American danger is a culture where leaders prioritize the next election, media spectacle, or factional victory over infrastructure, fiscal, discipline, education, public health, capacity, and national cohesion. And who was just describing perfectly? Donald Trump. Talking about, oh man, we're winning the war in Iran, we're making gains, we're doing this and that. But it says right here, Psalm 55 and 21, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter, but war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, yet were they drawn swords. So this is how these Edomites, these self-proclaimed white people, have fooled our people, the Israelites, the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, into buying into this whole system, vote Democrat, vote Republican, when there's two wings of the same bird. And then what's ultimately the plan of these elites of Esau, Edom, is to establish their new world order. That's why they're putting all these enchantments, these psyops, because while these people are divided, consumed with the bread and circus, the World Cup, Esau, Edom is getting ready to come down with that great wrath. He's about to collapse America, Babylon the Great. So the last couple points, it says how America could fall in a Rome-like pattern. A realistic scenario is gradual erosion rather than instant destruction, and it's already been happening. America's been eroding for a long time. Now it's just hanging on by a thread. All it needs is just that one mass black swan event, that people aren't expecting. It says, point 1, persistent debt and interest costs force cuts, tax increases, money creation, or a mix of all three. In 2020, I think the most dollars got printed out in that year comparing to, all the past years before 2020, which led to all-time high inflation. It says, point 2, a recession, war, energy shock, financial crisis hits when the country is already fiscally strained. In America, Babylon the Great is already fiscally strained. It says, point 3, political factions blame each other and resist compromise, slowing emergency action. Point 4, public trust falls further. Protest, unrest, regional conflict, and institutional paralysis grow. Point 5, infrastructure and public services deteriorate unevenly, while wealthy areas and private systems insulate themselves. Point 6, the country remains formally intact, but becomes less unified, less secure, less prosperous, and less able to project power abroad. And that's what's happening. That's why Trump, he's not backing out over there in Iran, because if the U.S. backs out, it's going to, the country's already looking at America like they're weak, like they're not that same big bad bully that they were post World War II era. It says the last point is important. Rome did not vanish overnight, and neither would America. A quote-unquote fall could mean loss of global dominance, which has already been happening, declining living standards, weaker federal authority, a damaged currency, or long-term fragmentation. Not necessarily the disappearance of the country, but thing about America, like the scripture says, in 1 hour, America is going to be utterly destroyed out of the face of the planet Earth. It says Rome's story is best understood as a warning about accumulated weaknesses, political dysfunction, fiscal imbalance, inequality, military overreach, and external shocks are manageable separately. When they reinforce one another for decades, they can overwhelm even a powerful empire. Historians generally describe Rome's decline in exactly those multi-causal terms rather than blaming one event or one people. So this has already been brewing up. Now the Lord is just about to make it made evident that this place is through, that it's done. So I'm going to get this last one. This is Job 14 and verse 5. Seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee. Thou hast appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. And Esau, Edom, the self-proclaimed white man, he's at the bounds that he cannot pass. Like the scripture says, there's no new thing under the sun. So this whole revived Roman Empire has already collapsed before. But the only difference now is that once this empire, America, Babylon the Great, collapses, it's not going to be revived. And it's not going to be no heathen nation calling next. No, it's going to be the kingdom of heaven being established upon the planet Earth, where the nation of Israel is going to rule, which comprises of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, and the Israelite foreigners that are going to come looking like these heathen nations, but their lineage goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's who the kingdom of heaven is for, not for no damn self-proclaimed white people, Arabs. No, it's going to be for the nation of Israel, which is knocking at the door, because this kingdom it's done. It's finished. It's not going to be healed. It's not going to bounce back. But that's pretty much the point. I pray that this was edifying to the elect. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory that's due to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who all learn this truth from and who do it well. Peace and salutations to the 144,000 and the rest of the elect. Unto you I say shalom.